Hey everyone, welcome to Drive To Win. I'm Justin Bell and I'm here at the Wynn Las Vegas for another episode of the show that I'm very excited to say is fast catching on with the American Formula One fans. I got a great guest for you this week, James Hinchcliffe, known as the Mayor of Hinchtown. He is joining me fresh from his appearance as a broadcaster at the British Grand Prix at the weekend. So much going on. Of course, me being here at the Wynn Las Vegas is not a coincidence, because we have the Heineken Silver Formula One Grand Prix of Las Vegas coming up in the middle of November. And you can tell on social media, you can tell by the fact they're releasing Gran Turismo games where you can go and drive around the track in the virtual world. It is a hot subject, and certainly one that every driver, team, sponsor, every kind of activation you can ever imagine will be taking place here in the middle of November, and the Wynn is at the center of that. You can go to winlasvegas.com/experiences/F1. And if you have the will, there is a way you can get involved from the Paddock Club all the way through to the $1 million experience. So definitely go and check it out. There's so much more information on what it's like to be here in Vegas. So you can, go and check it out. It's worth it. The British Grand Prix started in 1948. That was the first time a race was run there, just after World War II. There wasn't a lot of money around, but there was a will to go fast. After all, everyone had just been risking their lives and limb fighting for the cause, and they had that technical know-how and a desire for thrills. And racing was always based at that point around the perimeters of old RAF military airfields, actually very similar to they were in America with places like Sebring. And as the British Grand Prix grew, the British Racing Driver Club was founded. It took ownership of it, and pretty much every British Grand Prix for decades has been run at what is one of every driver's favorite Grand Prix. The track has evolved over the years, but it's still got a sense of pride, a sense of national pride. And the British people don't have a lot of things to be proud about, but when it comes to the British Grand Prix, they come out in full forces. I think it's coronations and royal weddings and the Grand Prix. Oh, and the World Cup. We kind of get pretty jazzed about that. 480,000 fans thought so as well over the 3 days of the Grand Prix. So outstanding success. It's the largest crowd ever seen at a Formula One race. So that was totally cool. If in another world, I'm a member of the British Racing Drivers Club. You have to achieve something in racing or be involved to be a member. They actually own Silverstone. So my dad went along with my brother Sebastian and had the most incredible time. And just hearing my dad so enthusiastic to have been there and seen the cars go around, and he was just blown away by the technology and the speed. But to see the fans and just that, I don't know, desire to follow our British drivers and the enthusiasm for that, he said, was something that he'll remember forever. Of course, we knew Max was going to win, but the gap is getting a little closer, isn't it? He didn't exactly storm off into the woods like he normally does. Obviously, he manages his pace, as you always know, but he was genuinely happy to have won at Silverstone. And I got to say, it was great because I thought there might be some negative booing from the crowd like you sometimes hear, but there was none of that. His pole position and then his conversion to a race win and his fastest lap, he got the trifecta. But as always, he's very gracious, and to see his enthusiasm and happiness and support for the other drivers, and obviously he has a great relationship with Lando Norris, and to see him, put his arm around him and also verbally compliment how well Lando did in the race by finishing second was just really heartwarming. I kind of enjoyed that, and it brought a human side to him. Naturally, you can be more benevolent when you are the king, and he is King Max right now. So, yeah, I think you're in a position to do that. But it's nice that he still does, although he still stomps all over them by his performance on track. As I said, the partisan crowd was nothing to be ashamed of, and they had a lot to support. We had Lewis Hamilton in third. We had Lando Norris in second. We had George Russell coming in sixth. We had Alex Albon coming in eighth. And of course, he's half Thai, half British. And just knowing what that did for the British fans of the sport was so special. And I don't know if you were watching the race, you might have wondered what that weird noise was as Lando overtook on the inside, to take the lead on the first lap going into the first corner, which he held for 5 laps. It was the noise of the crowd roaring above the sound of a Formula One engine, of 20 Formula One engines. And it made the hairs on my arms stick up when I thought about just what that must be like. And you hear it at Indy as well, when 500,000 people stand up and scream. But it's just so visceral and raw that it must have just been amazing to hear on the site. And of course, the drivers get very active when they're there on social media, and we saw some really fun clips. I really hope you follow every one of the drivers. I hope you follow Formula One, because the drivers have this. They all went out onto this massive stage where you could see the response. It looked like a U2 concert, but it was just for the drivers, and it was just fantastic. So that, I'm talking about the sort of fun side of it. But talking about the show, did you see, I was looking, but I was so happily surprised to see banner and signage for the Las Vegas Grand Prix all over the start area. The bridge over the start of the track, you can see said Las Vegas. Some of the banners down the side were showing it too. So it's nice to know that the marketing for our race, so to speak, my new home race, is being felt by the British fans over there and building up, kind of whetting the appetite for people to make it here to Las Vegas in November. So that was very, very cool. Of course, celebrities were, you've noticed now, part of the Liberty Media Formula One protocol is to bring celebrities into the very rarefied area of a Formula One grid. And boy, they were out. I think our buddy Mark Sutton, who you saw on the show last week, he took a lot of the photographs, but Brad Pitt, we'll get to him in a minute. He was there in a race suit. You've been living under a rock if you wonder why he wasn't there. And then British UFC star Paddy Pimblett was there. He's an up-and-coming British fighter. He was on the grid, got a lot of reception. Brad Pitt seems to be in every picture because he looks damn good in a race suit and did his thing. But Damian Lewis, this is actually Cara Delevingne. She got into a bit of a spat with Martin Brundle on the grid. I was trying to get Martin on the show today, but she refused to talk to him, which is a bit rude. One of the Oppenheimer brothers from Selling Sunset, you can see there. Brad Pitt again, because the photographers love Brad Pitt. But really, soccer players were on the grid in big force. We had, just it's crazy all over the place. You saw some celebrities making their way. I did see that is Chris Kamara, who's a big soccer player. That's Tiny Templar, British rapper, and one of our soccer legends, Chris Kamara, there in the grid. Now, Martin Brundle, when he does his grid walk, I don't know how he does what he does, because I struggle to identify people or remember their names, but he does an amazing job. But so if back to that Cara Delevingne thing, when Martin was walking down the grid to do the grid show, we've had celebrities snub him in the past, and he on the main broadcast, he's a very accomplished, very famous British racing driver who does this amazing grid walk. And part of the deal is if you are given an all-access pass, you have to talk to the global broadcast. And she said, I've been told I can say no, so I'm going to say no. She won't be asked back. So Brad Pitt, why was he there? Well, Sonny Hayes was there, and Sonny Hayes is a legend in Formula One, albeit a fictional one. And it is for this new Hollywood movie that they're calling at the moment, working title Apex. And I'm sure it won't stay there because no one knows outside racing what an Apex is. But they put on the grid an 11th fictional team. Now, I can't wait to talk to James about it when he comes on, because he would have seen them. But they basically recreated everything about a Formula One garage on the front, in the paddock. They had all the best equipment. Carlin Motorsports is running at one of the best British Formula teams, and filled it with the right equipment, the personnel. I can't even imagine what the cost of that would have been. And Pitt, I'm going to quote him right now a little bit. He did a great interview with Martin Brundle where he said, I play a guy who raced in the 1990s, who has a horrible crash. He craps out, disappears, and then he's racing in other disciplines. And his friend, played by Javier Bardem, he's a team owner, contacts him. They're a last place team. They've never scored a point, but they have a young phenom played by Damson Idris, and they bring him in as a kind of Hail Mary, and then hijinks ensue. Well, you saw those beautiful images there if you're watching this on YouTube. The car was a highly modified F2 car, and it looked incredible. The amazing thing to me is Formula One is so disciplined, so much pressure, billion-dollar stakes. Then you can see here, they managed to weave in the real drivers in alongside Brad and Damson. And there you see Sergio Perez walking back from the driver's briefing, and they were walking in. I mean, it's like acting, drivers acting as being drivers acting as being actors, and actors acting as being drivers. And I just think it's incredible because there's a long legacy of motorsports being brought to the silver screen. And James Garner's Grand Prix was back in the late 60s, early 70s, I think it was. And if you haven't watched it, watch it, because you see, real heroes, real racing champions like Damon Hill playing a cameo as himself with his trademark moustache. And it brought Monaco to life for me as a young man. And then you have Steve McQueen with Le Mans. And of course, then more recently you have Rush. But I think this is going to be especially relevant because it's been Joseph Kosinski, who did Top Gun Maverick. He's directing it. Jerry Bruckheimer's involved, with Lewis Hamilton as perhaps the ultimate consultant on it. His production company's involved, but Lewis has been playing a big role in making sure the dialogue's correct, because do drivers say certain things? How would they react to a situation? Only someone absolutely in the sport would know how that goes. So I was just also thinking, we've been talking when we talked to Mario, and the decision is coming soon on whether his Andretti with Cadillac team is going to be allowed the 11th and 12th spot on the grid. Don't know how that's going to go, but here's a clue. The way to get on the grid is to actually come up with a Hollywood blockbuster, and you're given an all-access pass. The vision is to make it the top movie ever, and let's hope they do so. Although I have one thing that comes to mind. When I was about 19 years old, Top Gun was on, Days of Thunder was on, and my dad had a Porsche driving school, and we had two Navy pilots come along, and they came along in their 911, two 911s, and we had a dinner, and we got chatting, and it was actually kind of fascinating. But they wanted to bring up about Days of Thunder, and they were saying, wasn't it amazing? Did you enjoy it? And all the drivers are like, yeah, it's kind of all right, but it's impossible, and it never happens that when you're on the banking in a NASCAR at Talladega and your crew chief comes on and tells you can pass on the outside, you don't downshift and hit the gas. That just wouldn't happen. You're already flat out. And the Navy guys laughed, and they said, but we loved it. And then they asked me, did I like Top Gun? And I said, well, it's the best movie I've ever seen in my life. And they went, well, you wouldn't put the flaps on at like Mach 2 because you'd just disintegrate. And I said, well, I don't care. I don't know that. And in that moment, I had the realization that these movies are not made for the experts in their field. They're made for the mass populace. And if it brings attention and awareness to our sport, just like Drive to Survive did, I think this will be a huge movie and very good for the sport. But just like a movie, our next topic is Daniel Ricciardo is back in Formula One. Nick de Vries, literally this news is hot this week, has got fired, has got let go from AlphaTauri with immediate effect. And Daniel Ricciardo was brought in as on loan from Red Bull Racing to their junior team. Now, he's going to start it at the Hungarian Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time, or about a week's time when you start to watch this. He is an 8-time Grand Prix winner. He's so popular. He became one of the big stars of Drive to Survive. So I think him being in the car is going to be magnificent. He has a new lease of life. If you read the reports from Red Bull Racing, Christian Horner, on how good he's been in the simulator, how passionate he is, then I think you can see that maybe coming back is going to be a great thing for him. It does bring up a question of, did Nick de Vries get a fair shot? Did he get enough time? Well, right from the beginning, Dr. Helmut Marko has been saying he's not a big supporter of his. I feel sorry for the kid. I mean, he's 28 years old. He didn't maybe get a long enough shot, but at Formula One, at stakes at the table, if you're not delivering, then you are going to get cut from the lineup. And unfortunately for him, he has. Red Bull is ruthless. We've seen it before, but it's very good news for the sport to have Daniel Ricciardo back in. It'll be a boost. AlphaTauri, remember, is supposed to be a junior feeding team. Mid-season, though, with the kind of investment they have, you can't bring in another young driver. You got to bring in an old dog. And an old dog, why did I say that? Someone with all that experience who understands the technology in the car. So a very exciting news. I can't wait to watch how it goes. Well, now it's time for my guest of the day. He's won 6 IndyCar races. He was pole sitter at the Indy 500. He did get famous on Dancing with the Stars, following in the footsteps of Elio Castroneves, who really did set the bar very high. He's a popular broadcaster and has his own podcast with Alexander Rossi as well. But more importantly, just back from the British Grand Prix, it is the Mayor of Hinchtown, James Hinchcliffe. Hinch, nice to have you on the show, mate.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. I was just complimenting you on this setup. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I wish I was as sort of sharp as the set, but it does a nice job. Yeah, of course, you don't need all this to have a great podcast, but doing it from the Wynn, it's been a really big part of my life now. So I love it. And of course, your podcast is doing great.
Yes, that's right. Off Track with Hinch and Rossi. We've I think we just clocked over 2 years on Sirius XM, which is pretty exciting. Over 1 million downloads, which we're pretty proud of. But yeah. It's a lot of work, as you know. These things they don't just happen, but it's been a lot of fun. Well,
obviously, wanted to talk to you because I watched you on over the weekend. You were at Silverstone for the British Grand Prix, and I know you've done a couple of the other races. How many races have you done now in Formula One?
This is my 4th one. I did 3 last year. 5th. I did 3 last year. I've got 6 on the docket this year. I did Miami, so this was my 6th one.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say, it was a great job, but also the British Grand Prix seems to be so proudly British, right? You can, from the flags that are flying to the crazy crowd, almost rabid crowd, and there you are, the American in the bunch, standing there. I mean, I know there's a lot of Europeans there. Well, you're Canadian, right? But you're there.
The Canadian.
The Canadian in the bunch. What is before we get into the race and everything? What's it like for you to be at the British Grand Prix? Does it make you realize that Formula One started there? How did you feel standing there?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely appreciate that that's the home of Formula One. That was always a bucket list race for me. I've been to the track before. I've been around the track before and different things over the years, but I'd never been for the Grand Prix. So to have the opportunity, not just to go, but to be a part of the whole show was something incredible. And the fact that it was the largest 3-day attended event in Formula One history. I mean, you could see it. You could feel it. It was incredible. 4 Brits in the field. They all qualified in the top 10. 2 ended up on the podium. I mean, I don't know if you could have written much of a better story. Obviously, if one of them had won it, but it would have been a little bit better if they had won. But it was still an incredible weekend.
And what's it like being, you do IndyCar stuff, and I know you're a big part of that. What's it like for you being there as a broadcaster? What are the main differences? Because it must be on a scale bigger than anything we know.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting, because obviously Formula One compared to any other motorsport is, it's just in a different league. It really is. And being there and seeing it all, it's funny. There's so much more to it, but at the end of the day, it's just a race. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if you're racing Indy cars, Formula One cars, stock cars, sports cars, whatever. Calling a race is calling a motor race. It's all 90% of it's pretty, transferable one to the other. but obviously the atmosphere there and everything about what Formula One is right now is so unique. And then the other thing that's a big difference for me is, American network sports broadcasting is a big deal.
Yeah.
And I've learned that now. Having worked in some other broadcasts and some other type of stuff, I understand now how that particular formula is held in such high regard around the world, and I understand it. It's very structured. It's a lot stricter. It's just you kind of in more of that box of the formula that has made it so successful over the years. When you go and work with F1 TV, it's a streaming service, technically.
Yeah.
You don't have the same kind of windows that you're forced to operate in. You don't have commercial breaks that you have to fit into a broadcast. So in a lot of ways, it's a bit more free-flowing. Some of it's a bit more conversational, kind of, especially in the pre and post stuff, than what we do in IndyCar. So it's kind of unique. They're two very different series and two very different ways of broadcasting, but it's a lot. I enjoy both immensely.
I'm sure. Yeah, because you were doing the F1 live stuff, weren't you? So I think the linear broadcast seems to have, they're pretty formatted. But no, it's really fun to. I actually choose to watch the F1 live stuff with Alec because I just enjoy the vibe of it. Did you ever test a Formula One car?
No, I didn't. It was always a bucket list thing. And I'll be honest with you, the dream's not dead. There's still maybe an iron or two in the fire to make that happen. Obviously this is a purely PR thing at this point. I'm not trying to make a big comeback to the sport, but no, I would love to do it. I would love to drive a contemporary car just to kind of see and feel, what it can do. My pitch to F1 is, hey, look, if you want me to really know what I'm talking about, it would make sense to just give me a couple laps in a car.
Just a couple. Mario did it. So how bad can it be for you, right? I mean, if that little short guy did it, you can do it. No, amazing.
Easy.
Yeah. What do you feel when you watch the cars? Because Indy cars, they're Indy cars to anyone look fast. But I spoke to my dad this morning, actually. He was there in the BRDC suite. And he said, JB, he walked out to Stowe and he said, they are so bloody fast. Did you get that impression too, just as a fan, like, holy cow, these things are fast?
Yeah, they're impressive machines, man. There's no doubt about it. And I've had the opportunity to sit trackside for a couple of sessions at IndyCar lately, and it still blows me away how fast those things are. Yeah. And then you get to an F1 race and you stand, especially at somewhere like Stowe or like Copse, and you just look at what they can do. And for me, what the really big differentiator is how they can change direction at those speeds. When you kind of watch, Silverstone's the best place to kind of experience this, but you watch through Maggots and Beckett's and just see the rate at which they can change direction at those speeds is just phenomenal. And as a driver, it gives you goosebumps. Like it's so cool to watch. You just want to be in that cockpit experiencing it.
Yeah, I bet. And what was your access like as in your role? Did you get, I know you talk to drivers, but what's the paddock like? Because it's my experience of Formula One was it's like trying to get the golden ticket at Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. But once you've got it, you're in the paddock. It's pretty casual, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's funny because you're right. They've got those electric turnstiles. You need the right pass to get in, and it's very secure and all that. But then you get there, and it's very kind of business as usual. What's so different from like an IndyCar paddock or maybe even a NASCAR paddock to a lesser extent is you never see the cars. You could go an entire weekend walking around the paddock and never see a car in real life. All the garages are sort of blocked off. There's just a short trip from the garage to the team hospitality and engineering offices and stuff, and the drivers sort of bounce back and forth. But it's it's a little, I don't want to say sterile, but it's almost the vibe you get. Everyone's working, everyone's got a purpose, everyone walking around has a place to be, and they probably should have been there 2 minutes ago is kind of the sense that you get. So it's a bit different in that sense, but no, everybody there has been super welcoming, and it's been great getting to know some of the drivers a little bit, learn a little bit more about that world.
I bet it has. Well, let's recap the race a little bit. No great surprise that Max did what he did. But when Lando went by at the start, and he had a great start and led the British Grand Prix for 4 or 5 laps, I could hear the crowd over you guys talking. Was it that? Could you feel it as well? Could you hear it?
Yeah, absolutely. It was wild because the first time he went through each corner on that first lap, you could quite literally hear the crowd over the sound of the cars, which was just unbelievable. And, Julian Palmer, who was commentating, with me up in the booth, he kind of said, as a British driver to lead laps the British Grand Prix, it's an absolute bucket list thing. And you never know, like with Max starting pole, you never knew if he was going to get the chance to do that. But both McLarens got that brilliant start. I mean, Oscar almost had Max into one as well.
Yeah.
But for Lando to get that opportunity and lead those couple laps out front, it was special. And you could see the whole place was just buzzing.
It was so exciting. I'm sitting, like you do as a fan when you're watching. But it did see, how were you analyzing it because Max didn't do his normal disappear off. Is that, and sometimes you go, well, he's gone to 9 seconds and he's holding it, right? And he's just holding it. But it didn't seem that way. What was it like for you guys? You have much more data than us. Were the others just closer? Was Lando literally able to hold that pace? What was your interpretation of that moment?
To me, it seemed that way. I mean, and Jolie and I had a little verbal spar about this at the after show, in the post race show, because yes, Max still kind of, I think, had everything under control, but it wasn't the 30-second win margin that we've seen, at other times in the year. I know there was a late safety car, but even after the safety car, he didn't just romp off into the distance to the same extent he normally does. He didn't seem to be as happy on the soft tires as some other drivers. Maybe the Red Bull is a little bit more affected by wind. Obviously, his peak performance is quite high, but it was quite windy and the conditions were quite challenging in a lot of ways. And so I'm with you, JB. I don't think he had quite as much in hand. I mean, it was still an obnoxious amount and he still won, by a mile. But compared to what we've seen, I do think that car started out so strong that your ceiling is so much closer at that point. Everyone else started out with a big deficit, and as they bring all these updates, they're slowly chipping away at that gap.
I was really impressed, and I guess for me, one of the biggest stories was how Oscar Piastri. I mean, you can't say there's first or second drivers in that team, but Lando naturally has the tenure there, right? And he's the lead. But I was trying to explain to some friends on Monday, that the job as a teammate is, if you're not the one winning that weekend, you should be second, right? You should be right there with your teammate. You race with some amazing teammates, and you're not always going to be the guy on the day. Your teammate sometimes is the guy, and your job is to support, ideally to support him. You could see how McLaren have obviously evolved. Their developments, upgrades have really worked. But for Piastri to be right there, you could see the strategy options they started to have. And I bring that up because that, to me, is in identical cars what two great drivers should do, which only further exaggerated the differences between the Red Bulls. How were you guys interpreting that? Because that was the perfect teammate play, and Perez's was not the perfect teammate play.
No, for sure. I mean, Checo's been on a bad stretch, and no doubt he's got to figure out his Saturday issues because he needs to be up there with Max. The kind of benefit for Red Bull right now is number 2 in the field. The best of the rest in the midfield seems to change week to week. Yeah. So it's not consistently the same group that are getting points. It's fluctuating a ton. So Red Bull's able to sort of run away. I mean, Max alone has enough points to be leading the Constructors' Championship. Yeah, that's how big it is. But like you say, what Piastri was able to do by being right there with Lando was at the beginning of the race before Max really got that gap open, and it looked like they were sort of hanging with him a little better than we'd seen. It really opens up those strategy options, because when you've got 2 McLaren versus 1 Red Bull, you can split those strategies, try to force Red Bull into one move, and then if the safety car falls the right way, you could be sitting in a good spot. Now, again, I don't think anyone's got the pace to keep Max behind, even if they did manage to jump him. But to your point, that's exactly what you have to do as a team, is be operating both at that level. So that way, when you find yourself in that situation, you can do those split strategies, try to force the hand, and maybe come out on top.
Definitely when you look at inter-team pressure, I kind of talked about it on the last couple of shows. I'm like, watch this space. There's drivers that are going to be up against it, because the commercial demands of Formula One, I talked about it at the top of the show, the commercial demands are so big that if you're not pulling your weight, like Nick De Vries, there's a lot of people online saying, oh, he should have been given more races to show his stuff. $300 million budgets or something, you're not going to get a lot of time to show your stuff if you're not doing it. What was that energy in the paddock? Obviously, we didn't know the De Vries news when you left the track on Sunday, but how would you apply that driver pressure analysis to, I mean, Lance Stroll has a different dynamic, but to a Checo, what do you think could go on there?
Well, it's, Nick's situation is so unique just because of the nature of the Red Bull program. It's always been exceptionally cutthroat. They have a storied history in removing drivers mid-season. And so, if you want to compare him against another rookie, say a Logan Sargent, who you could argue is performing at a similar level.
Yeah.
I don't think it's even an argument that the AlphaTauri is a worse car than the Williams is at the moment. Logan's made mistakes. He's been inconsistent at times, but he's a rookie and it's expected. And Williams is supporting him in public and hopefully behind the scenes. And he'll get his full season, to try to work out the kinks and then come back stronger next year. Nick was just in an environment where that's not how they do it. That's not how Dr. Marco does it.
Nope.
And that's not how Red Bull's ever done it. So you definitely knew the pressure was on. I honestly didn't see the Ricciardo play coming, though.
No.
I honestly thought that they would have, dipped into their driver pool, a Liam Lawson or someone like that. Marco's explanation is they didn't want to disrupt Liam's season. The car's not very good as it is. They acknowledge that. Let's bring in an experienced driver, maybe give the team a little bit of direction on how to develop it going forward. And then also this could be a bit of an audition for Daniel for the second Red Bull car in 2024 if Checo can't pick up the performance. So there's a lot of dynamics there. But yeah, you can feel that tension in the paddock when a driver's starting to be up against it a little bit for sure.
And we know it, right? I mean, every driver I know has experienced that at some point. Maybe not, but we've all gone, God, why did that guy go in the motorhome? Right? You're looking at your team boss and you see someone that could take your seat, do that. Yeah. And in Formula One with the scrutiny of the world, it's unbelievable. It's quite special. Well, I guess we'll just have to watch that space, but certainly seeing Ricciardo, his enthusiasm, what he's been doing there, I don't know whether a 34-year-old coming back in 24 is the right play. But I think there are other drivers in that merry-go-round, right, that could take the second Red Bull seat. But geez, I mean, he knows the environment, Yeah,
it's an interesting situation because I think 5 years ago I would have agreed with you, no questions asked. A few things have made me now maybe reconsider that. Magnussen taking a year off, coming back arguably stronger. Nico Hulkenberg taking 3 years off, coming back at 36, I think.
Fernando Alonso
and absolutely just Fernando Alonso. Sometimes that break can just be so good for a driver. I mean, you know how exhausting this sport can be, how draining it can be, especially when you go through the kind of years that Daniel went through at the end of his McLaren stint. It can get you down. I mean, it's a mental grind trying to survive that. 18 months off to kind of recharge, find himself back in an environment that he knows, that loves him, supports him. Christian Horner making interesting comments about how when they put Dan back in the simulator, they didn't recognize him because of all the bad habits he picked up trying to figure out how to make the McLaren go fast. They've beat those out of him. He's back to his old, is what they're saying. And so you never know. You just never know. It's happened enough in contemporary Formula One that I wouldn't put it past Red Bull looking for experience. I mean, look, Checo was on the way out. Checo was out of a ride. He had lost his ride at what was Racing Point at the time, and he was lifelined by Red Bull. He was not old, but on the older scale. And it worked out well, at least for a couple of years. Maybe it worked out well up until, race 6 or 7 this year. So it's I wouldn't put it past them. I've seen weirder things. Let's put it that way.
You never know. And I was watching the race on Sunday, and then about Sergio's Perez's stomp through the field, which wasn't as stompy as it has been in the past, and then Christian Horner's comments on social media on Sunday night and Monday, when he's sort of like, yeah, he had a good drive through, but he's got to sort out Saturday, as you said. And it made me remind me of when, I broke a fence once by reversing through it in our Land Rover on the farm. And I was so proud when I went to my dad and I said, "But Dad, look how I fixed the fence. It's brilliant." He said, "Yeah, but you're the one that bloody knocked it down. So you don't deserve that much credit for fixing the fence." And that's going to be the common story, isn't it? Yes, he comes through the field, but you shouldn't have to come through the.
Exactly right. I mean, it's not even about celebrating if and when he's able to fix the Saturdays. He never should have been in the situation he's been in. Missing Q3, 5 races in a row in a Red Bull with the pace that car has right now. That is just not acceptable. The scary thing is when, if I'm Checo Perez, you hear Dr. Marco say things like, well, yeah, there's nobody better to put in the car right now. That means they've thought about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That means they've had honest conversations about who we'd put in the car, and they decided, well, yeah, he's available, but he's not as good. He's available, but he's not as good. But they're actively having those conversations. So, I mean, the gun is really to Checo's head now. He's got to make this happen, and quickly. I know he has a contract, but as we know in racing, that doesn't mean anything. And if they want to make a change, they will make a change.
Lewis Hamilton finished third. It just reminded me of what a rock star he is. When he takes to the stage and you see him out there with the British fans going absolutely bonkers for him. Oh, he's won that race so many times. And finishing third was a result, on the podium was a result of that late safety, but great pace from the Mercedes. But he sort of said something after the race that, we need to look at what's going on. We need to look at the other cars. He's putting some pressure, I think, on his team that we need to get up there a bit more. We need to look at the Red Bull and look at our upgrades. How do you feel? You sit there and, as I say, you talk with Jolyon. I'm sure at dinner you all talk about it. Where do you think Mercedes is? Because they're capable of having a good result, aren't they? But it isn't really reflective of where the car is.
No, it's not. I think they actually outperform the car as a team sometimes, and that's what's so impressive about that organization. With that fluctuation in the midfield that we were talking about before. You go back to Spain, best of the rest was Mercedes for sure. Then we went to Montreal, best of the rest was Aston. We went to Austria, best of the rest was Ferrari. We came to Silverstone, best of the rest was McLaren. They've now joined the fight. They've entered the chat for the first time all year. So that consistency is tough. And when you look at a team like Mercedes, they qualified 6th and 7th, certainly below where they thought they were going to be. Silverstone probably closer to Barcelona than the tracks in between. So you would have thought maybe that was going to be a track that suited them better if they got outpaced by Ferrari in qualifying. But their strategy is always absolutely spot on. Their race pace was phenomenal. I mean, if the track had been a little bit easier to pass on, I think both drivers would have made more progress. But they showed a lot of good pace. George Russell making those softs last over half the race distance and still having pace was amazing. But what is so impressive about Lewis, you look at that drive, and you listened to his comments afterwards, and he goes, look, I know that the chances of a safety car are very high. And it's right. In the last 10 years, only 1 year have they not had a safety car at Silverstone. So he went with a strategy that was allowing him to stay out as long as possible under the hopes that a safety car came out and he could get that cheap pit stop. And that's exactly what happened. So yes, incredible driver, but he's so smart. He just thinks, he uses the data. He like looks historically how it goes. And that's how he earned himself that spot. He qualified behind George Russell, but he finished in front of him because he chose a different strategy, trying to play the odds. And hey, we're in Vegas having this conversation, right? He gambled and he won. He came up right. And then the other thing that was so cool was, obviously Lando was the star of the weekend, up there on the podium, first time at his home Grand Prix. You hear the cheers when he gets up on the podium. But man, when Lewis came up, it dwarfed the sound that you heard from Lando. And it just still shows you what power that guy has. 8-time Grand Prix winner at Silverstone. And the fans there still just hold him in the highest regard.
And it's just, I always say, we see it in IndyCar, you see it in sports cars, but especially in Formula One, just because you're having a tough time, your car is, your team is, motorsports is so secular, as in it's a roller coaster. Williams used to be one of the top, the most dominating teams. Ferrari were. McLaren has been. Right now it's Red Bull. But Lewis has not forgotten how to drive, nor has Fernando Alonso. And as drivers, I think we see things when they're driving that make you go, damn. Damn. So as someone that was in IndyCar, you must have quite a few of those damn moments when you're watching them perform.
Yeah, absolutely. I write an article on Formula1.com after each race that is called Hinch's Heroes, and it's kind of picking out the drives of the day for me. And sometimes they're drives to 12th. It's not always necessarily about who's on the podium. And you bring up Fernando as a great example. He was one of the heroes for me this weekend, because if you actually watched that race, the Aston Martin was not a quick car in race pace, but Fernando always has had a train of cars behind him. Nobody could get by him. Checo was the only guy that was able to make it happen because of the obvious car advantage. But at different points, he had Alpines behind him. He had Mercedes behind him. He had Williams behind him. He had all these cars that were quick, and nobody could get by him because he's just so crafty. He's so wily when it comes to racecraft and defense, especially. He's remarkable. So even though he only drove to seventh, on the grid in an underperforming car, that was a heck of a drive and a really strong performance. Very, very classic Fernando Alonso. So it is kind of fun to watch that. That's the challenge with F1, is kind of differentiating the car from the driver and really trying to assess that driver's performance on a given Sunday versus the car's performance.
And do you think that, I think that it's, obviously that track doesn't suit the Aston Martin quite as much, but it's not like they've gone down. It's just the others have come up, probably, right? It's just McLaren are on a roll. We'll see it maybe come back. Do you think he'll come back like at Hungary?
It's let's put it this way. Formula One cars never go slower over a season.
Yeah.
Right. So they like Red Bull just started at such a high level. They were knocking out those incredible performances. But when you already start at such a high level, the gains you can make are kind of going to be infinitesimally smaller. And so the McLarens and the Ferraris, the ones that started a little bit, and the Mercedes that started a bit worse off, those improvements, those upgrades they bring, they're going to be bigger chunks of lap time, and that gap's going to close. So I think they've been outdeveloped for the last few races. Even Fernando said they kind of need to get to that summer break. They've got Hungary and then Spa before the summer break, and that needs to be a bit of a reset for them. Hopefully they have a bit more on the upgrade side coming. They will have been hit by the fact they were so high in the Constructors' Championship when the next raft of wind tunnel allotment was sort of dished out. So they're not going to have as much wind tunnel time in the second half of the two to develop and CFD time and that's why these rules have been made this way. And look, Red Bull's ruining it. Everybody else is doing what F1 wanted to do with these new rules and regulations. And we talked about how much the midfield is struggling. If you took Red Bull out of the equation, this would be one of the most incredible seasons. Yeah. So, but at the same time, and we said this a lot you're watching history be made with Max and Red Bull right now. And I think anybody that's a true fan of the sport or fan of any sport, fan of sports, watching history be made is still really special. So even though the race for the front might be best, the racing throughout the field is actually very good week in and week out. And so we're being treated to that. And at the same time, we're watching history be made, which we should all count ourselves pretty lucky to get to see, because it's a rare thing that Red Bull and Max are doing right now.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding us of that, because that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. It is special. Before I let you go, I've got to ask, my girlfriend will kill me if not, did you see Brad Pitt?
I did from a distance. I got to say, he looks great. Smells terrific.
He looks better than any of us in a race suit. And that's really annoying, you know?
Well, he looks better than most people in most things. I'm not going to take that one, too personally. He's a phenom, but it was really cool kind of seeing that whole production there. They had their own garage. It was decked out with all the same equipment, the toolboxes, the gantries, the pit perch was there. Their altered GP2 or F2 car, sorry, GP2, that were on the grid and did part of the formation lap. I mean, it's so cool how in depth they are going with this, and I think it's going to be a pretty phenomenal film.
Yeah, I can only imagine the logistics. I was thinking, when we're doing a little shoot, right? If you're doing a little thing for the TV or you're doing a branded thing or whatever, you plan it all. I can't even imagine the logistical meetings they had to go through to get it cleared with Formula One, to not F up the Formula One pit lane. I mean, the potential for disaster when massive business is going on, right? Massive business. How do they get that sorted?
I mean, as you know, try a 30-second TV commercial when you have a racetrack all to yourself and no other commitments is still an 8-hour day and a lot of logistics and a lot of red tape to get through. So how they're doing what they're doing, I don't know. I mean, I got to say that it's taken a tremendous amount of cooperation from everyone at F1 and FOM and the FIA. They obviously want this thing to happen and they want it to be good. So it's good to see that everyone from the film side is getting the support, because hopefully the product's going to be great. I'm
excited too. Is Vegas one of the races you're going to do? Yay.
Yes.
That's cool, man. Well, hopefully you can come and visit, right? You can come and visit
I would love to come. I would love to come check it out.
The fancy place. Hey, Hinch, thanks so much for coming on. That's really, really special. What's the next race for you in Formula One?
So Austin's next for me. And then I do Mexico, Brazil, and Vegas. So I got 4 more coming up.
Okay. Local travel, so to speak. All right, buddy. Take care. Thanks so much for coming on. That's really cool.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me. Take care.
Later. Bye. Wow, very cool. Very cool to hear from, I'm not going to call him a horse because I'd have to say horse's mouth, but you know what I mean. Very cool to obviously hear from James, because being there at the British Grand Prix is a very special thing. I just wish I could have made it along with the rest of my. Well, the next race up is the Hungary Grand Prix in Budapest. It's 70 laps of the 4.381 kilometer Hungary in Budapest. Sunday, July the 23rd. Of course, we know what the storylines are going to be. Max is going to win, but how close are the rest going to be? As Hinch just said, if Max wasn't there, we'd be having one of the most sensational races for the championship ever. But the big attention will be on AlphaTauri with Daniel Ricciardo behind the wheel, because he is back in a Formula One car on the grid, and I'm sure there will be an immense amount of attention, but his newfound enthusiasm and passion for the sport and his role in Formula One is going to be really exciting to watch. Is the McLaren pace sustainable? That's something that I think everybody's going to have their eyes on. Lando Norris has been saying that they do have work to do. They are only sort of 75%, I think, through their upgrades, so they still have more to come. Can Mercedes capitalize on what Lewis and George pulled off last weekend? Podiums are very hard to get, but as you just heard, Lewis is perhaps one of the brightest in-car brains there is in Formula One right now, and he will certainly be doing his utmost to maintain that. And I think the way Toto Wolff runs that team is exceptional, and they grind and outperform the car, as we just heard. So many variables, but of course, I think when you look back at the results from 2022, that the final finishing order won't look too much different. Within reason, last year it was Max, then Lewis, then George Russell, then Carlos Sainz, then Sergio Perez. I would like, if I was a betting man, I am here in Vegas, I bet we'll see that top 5 won't look too much difference when we're meeting again on the week after the Hungary Grand Prix. But we're here in Las Vegas. It is all about the car culture in the casino right now, from the Formula One car in the hallway to the incredible Koenigsegg that I saw out in one of the hallways. Just there's cars and race cars and historic cars making their way into here, all because not just the Formula One race, but we have the Las Vegas Concours, which is coming up the Saturday before the Grand Prix. Visit LasVegasConcours.com, because on the November 11th and 12th, this will be the epicenter of the car collector world. And I know some of the cars are coming. We can't tell you yet, but literally we have cars that have won some of the biggest concours in the world, the car collector world. They're going to be here. some of the latest hypercars, both electric and internal combustion. We have cars that represent the best of pop culture, as well as some of the biggest celebrities ever to make their way into a car event. So can't think of anything more exciting. We're going to be back in 2 weeks. We have a big new sponsor announcement that will be joining us. So I can't wait to tell you all about that. Stay in touch on social. Follow along on Instagram especially. And don't forget to share the news about the show with your friends. I'm having a great time. I hope you're enjoying watching. Justin Bell here with Drive to Win. I'll see you in a couple of weeks.